You know your movie making. Oh god. But the Hot Shots was great, like
Hot Shots,
especially Hot Shots Part 2.
Part 2 was even better.
When we started doing the Rambo thing, from Rambo 3.
Gummy bears.
With all the gummy bears. That still gets me. And then taking your woman's wee beauty spot and putting it on him.
My favorite.
It's just so stupid.
Like, I've got like two favorite gags. One's from Airplane and one's from Hot Shots. And one Hot Shots is where he's like walking along the beach and he's talking about this isn't Hot Shots, the first one actually, where he's talking about his dad being an airline pilot as well, you know, because it's the Top Gun ripoff. But ripoff is it's a spoof. But and he's like, she's like, "You're nothing like your father," and he's like, "I still have his eyes." And then he opens up a little like glasses pouch and there's just two eyeballs in there. That gets me every time as well. But the one in Airplane, like, that's my favorite joke of all time. Is just like he goes through the whole war that he was in, like his like lore of why he's afraid of flying because he was like a war pilot. And then he's like goes through like his there. He's like, and that's when I got my drinking problem. And he just like throws the glass all over himself. It's like so stupid, but just perfect joke with all the good setup. Do you know what I mean? I love those films.
Yeah, you really don't get anything like that these days. We were talking about this in the last episode a little bit as well, but like that type of old, it's not even old comedy. It's just a type of comedy.
It really was like from probably the mid '80s through to like the first Scary Movie I want to say was like peak spoof movie. Like there was all the Hot Shots movies, the two of them, the Naked Gun movies. There was obviously Scary Movie, as I say, and Loaded Weapons, another one that I was. But really
even
into.
In the 2000s as well, you know, you had like Not Another Teen Movie.
Well, that's when the quality dips quite drastically, I feel like.
Oh no, I liked a lot of those still.
Okay, that's
you know,
fair.
It's maybe it's just like because I was a teenager and they were kind of teenage movies.
You were a teenager that wasn't like other teenagers.
Yeah, you know, I was edgy. I wasn't like all the other girls.
But like I just feel like it dips so drastically, and like I feel like I'm not sure even if somebody can do it well now, because it's like, what are they doing a spoof of? Like, I feel like not enough things are like.
Yeah, life is imitating art at this point, doesn't it? Like,
oh yeah, first of all,
you put a new song. What?
But like Top Gun was like everybody watched Top Gun. You know, and when it came out, pretty much everybody knew of it. You know, everybody was aware of it.
And you mean there's not the cultural touchstones anymore that you can draw on? Yeah.
That's a big part of that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I feel like at least maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I suppose it depends who you're making it for, because I think kids still have a lot of those cultural touchstones, like Minecraft in the Minecraft movie, Fortnite. You know, a lot of the like Frozen and. You know, Frozen's still massive, and it was massive whenever my daughter was a kid, and she's a grumpy teenager now, and she was running around like, I've seen Frozen more than I've seen any other movie ever made. I've seen
it's Shrek 2 for me, to be clear.
I've seen Frozen easily 400 times.
Easily?
Yeah.
Ugh,
you know, rough. It would just be on, it would finish, and it would go back to the start, and it would go back on again for about a year and a half.
But like. Even then, I can't think of a good spoof of Frozen. Do you know what I mean? Like, Disney isn't exactly rife for a good spoof. People take it too edgy, and it's not as because like Hot Shots and all, they weren't edgy. They were just stupid. They were just silly, and that's where the sweet spot was. You know, they weren't trying to be like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could do that, but I mean, doing the live action version of it would maybe be well. I don't know if it would be difficult getting the rights.
Yeah, that's the difficult part.
That would definitely be difficult.
Well, I think this is like a Weird Al situation. Like, Weird Al doesn't have to, in America specifically, the parody laws, so to speak, he doesn't have to ask for permission. He just does that to keep good relations. So, like, he has written, like, 2 or 3 Prince song spoofs. One was called 1999, as in, like the price, as opposed to the year, like 19:99. but he has never released them because Prince didn't want him to. He just said okay. So but he could legally just do that, but he just didn't want to be a dick. So.
Yeah, that's a weird one because I know the copyright laws. If you're doing something with copyrighted material, it has to be transformative for it to be fair usage. So if you're making a movie based on another movie, doing it as a parody, like obviously there must be some specific line where you have to make it different enough.
I think that's the case though. I think there's a point of it where if it's parody and very clearly parody,
and reference to it, then,
it's okay. Yeah. I don't know how it works. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but and Weird Al songs aren't exactly like very different from the originals, realistically. So that can't be the thing. It can't be like it has to be so different. You know?
I think you really gotta have a good lawyer if you're
exactly. I think so.
Especially with like Disney. I'd say Disney doesn't fuck about whenever people are making fun of their IPs.
Like Disney and Nintendo are like the big ones. Nintendo's the worst one. Like
is Nintendo the worst one?
Yeah, they are so litigious. Like people, like they go after.
Well, I've seen the Pokemon thing. Pokemon going after Pal World, and they actually created a patent after after Pal World came out. Pokemon filed a patent for how Pokeballs work, specifically so that they could go after Pal World and sue them.
Well, TPC is in the Pokemon company separate from Nintendo, but Nintendo, when it comes to like emulating games and stuff, that like some boy built a whole emulators and made them free to everybody, and then Nintendo sued the absolute life out of them because, and this happens a lot because even though there's no legal way to buy any of these games from Nintendo, they will profit. For some reason, they're still against it, and I don't get it.
Yeah, I really disagree with that. If it's fundamentally anti-consumer, if you create a piece of art and someone wants to be able to enjoy that art, but you haven't made it available to them, it's like if someone can't afford to go and look at the Mona Lisa in wherever the fuck Mona Lisa is, France or something, like if someone just goes on like online and prints out a picture of the Mona Lisa to look at, be like, oh, that's beautiful. I don't know where I'm going with this one. I've lost the run of myself.
I have,
but you know what I mean. That's like
I bought a set of socks online, probably drunkenly. I've had them for quite a while. I don't remember why I bought them, but they're all different. Like classic artworks. Like there's the one with the wee cherub. There's the statue of David. It's one of them. Like it's all like this, and it's like probably most socks that I own at this point are all these art ones that I bought. But like imagine Da Vinci coming in. Like not about that.
Get those fucking socks off your feet.
Don't tread on me.
Well, first of all, like all the old stuff is in the public domain now, isn't it? So you're realistically, it's not like Da Vinci's descendants aren't getting any money from those socks. It's just some dude in fucking China just cranking out socks.
And fair play to him.
I really hate the idea of socks like that as well. Not specifically for any moral reason. Just I fucking hate socks that have to be paired together.
I have the problem with the kids.
I just love having just
black socks.
Black socks. All my socks match with all my socks. But I have some jazzy socks that people have bought me. People buy me like gift socks because I'm of that age now where I get socks as a gift. But they'll buy me like Dragon Ball Z socks. Because I'm still a fucking dweeb, even though I'm a grown man. So now I've got like all these different socks that are all, need matched up together.
Yeah.
Or like, falling in reverse socks, like band socks. And it means I've got to like look whenever I do the washing, I've got to sift through and go, right, what? And Emma's got loads of socks that need matched. And she actually gets annoyed if I hang them up to dry, not beside each other. Like if I put them on the clothes horse any which way, and they're all not like in pairs beside each other. She's like, why are you doing this?
You're putting unmatching socks energy out in the world now. That's why. I actually don't have any socks that don't need to be paired that I own, but it's because I very infrequently wear socks because I wear Toms and Crocs.
Okay.
Like most of the time. I wear socks to the gym, pretty much. And that's it. Yeah.
I've got a friend, Benny, who he always wears mismatching socks, but he does it on purpose, and he'll wear mismatching Crocs as well.
Mismatching Crocs, that's too far for me.
No. So he'll have like
not about that.
He'll have pairs of Crocs. So he'll have like a luminous pink Croc and a luminous green Croc, and he has them swapped.
It's not
so
exactly.
He's got like pairs that are the wrong way around, but then he'll have his socks mismatched as well.
That's slightly different.
So it's almost a style thing.
Yeah, that's a conscious effort to like. He's still matching them. If they're both a luminous color, he's still matching them.
Yes.
Just not how they were originally meant to be matched. I was just thinking, I have 2 pairs of Crocs, these grey pair and this other black pair that has like a luminous blue band.
Yeah.
And like they would just look stupid together. They wouldn't look artistic or right. So that's why in my head I was like, this is stupid.
See, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he puts more effort on to do that or less effort on to do it.
I think it's more.
Yeah, maybe it is more. I always thought it was less. But now that we're talking about it, maybe it does require more effort.
It gives off the air of less, which is good. It's a good air to give off.
Yeah.
So, like, don't think I'm slagging him off, but but I think that it takes more effort to make the decisions on how you're going to do that.
Well, he's told me before he specifically does it, so that whenever kids walk past and look, that they can be like, oh, look, I want to do my shoes like that. And then the parents have to explain that the kids can't wear mismatching shoes.
I was about to say that's quite sweet, but then it's not really at all.
No. He's just trolling. Just like, look, kids, you can do this too. Then the parents are like, no, you can't.
You can't. Oh, God.
So again, we're 12 minutes in and we haven't got into the Uncanny Valley.
It's 2 episodes in a row now. To be fair, I didn't have my puppet story the last time, so I mean, I did some of it.
Okay. Well, the thing, I can't remember what started me thinking about the Uncanny Valley, but I've been watching shows about like robotics and the advancement of AI and all that kind of thing. So it was probably something to do with that. That they're just getting more and more advanced all the time, and they're kind of getting to the point where they're reaching the Uncanny Valley. If anybody doesn't, I think everybody knows what the Uncanny Valley is. Do I need to explain it? Should I explain it?
I mean, if anybody's seen Westworld, they know what the Uncanny Valley is, but
Westworld is human actors,
I know,
so they're not in the Uncanny Valley.
They make them uncanny intentionally to make that a whole thing. That's the whole point of it. Yeah.
In Westworld,
yeah.
But in Westworld,
there's parts of it where like their eyes go weird and stuff. If you watch, it's a really good nuanced. I haven't watched it in years actually, and really want to rewatch that soon actually because I really like that. But let's go.
So the Uncanny Valley is whenever you go from making something that resembles a person, like a figurine, but then once it gets more and more lifelike, it gets to a certain point where it starts to make people uncomfortable. So it's in video games, for example. We had really rubbish graphics for years and years and years, up until probably the late 2000s, early 2010s. And then they started getting to the point where they were quite close to human-like, but just weren't quite there. They still had that sort of like little plastic veneer to them. Or,
they're still there. It still lives in that reality right now.
Yeah.
Like nothing's exactly...
No, they're not exact, but they're so close now that I think they're kind of past the uncomfortable part of the Uncanny Valley, where they're able to emote properly, they're able to do all of they're able to capture the expressions and performances of actors and lay those over on the, like metahuman faces and stuff. So we're kind of pretty much through the other side of the Uncanny Valley. You can tell that they're not humans, but it's not got that weird, uncomfortable feeling that, like, for example, old like Skyrim and Oblivion and old Bethesda games where you're
straight up uncanny.
Where you're talking to people and their faces aren't doing the emotions, but their voices are doing the emotions and stuff. So it used to be blocky characters and it was fine, and then now it's very, very detailed characters and it's fine. But there was an area in between where it was close to being there,
detailed, but
it was
enough,
just there was something really off-putting about the whole thing.
The whole graphics discussion has always been a thing for me. Where like I'm a big Nintendo head, that I am. So I've never had. I'm never going to have
graphics.
I've never cared about graphics, and I've never had I've never owned a console that even was capable. Really, even the Switch is not really capable of like. Well, probably is capable, but there's no games on it like that. But I just have never cared about graphics. I've always been really confused about when people are like, Hi, come see us. Graphics class. I'm like, well, is it a good game though? Is it fun? Is it Mario Kart levels of fun?
Yeah, I definitely did get caught up in the graphics thing. But in fairness, Nintendo were at the forefront of graphics for a long time.
They were.
As
That's
well.
the worst
like,
part.
Going from the 32-bit era into the 64-bit era.
N64.
Yeah, the N64 was a substantial jump up from the PlayStation graphics and the Sega Saturn graphics. Maybe not so much the Sega Saturn graphics. They had some interesting things they were doing with the hardware. And like Panzer Dragoon Saga is just one of the best games of all time. Like we should have talked about that with the lost media thing, and we were talking about people redoing the emulators as well, of course, because Panzer Dragoon Saga, they only made like a couple of thousand copies of it. It came out right at the end of the Sega Saturn, and basically outside of Japan, there's almost no copies of the thing at all.
Can you emulate it though?
Well, they've actually lost the master code so they can't actually make like a remaster or anything because they would need to rebuild the game from the ground up. Yeah. But I did find, I suppose it would be technically illegal, but this is what we're talking about again. I found disc images online that somebody ripped the discs that you'd be able to create your own discs if you had the formatting to get them to work on a Sega Saturn. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure somebody can do that and make reproductions
and sell them.
I actually did find reproductions as well that were on for sale, but it does clearly say reproduction on the print on the front of it.
Well, I tell you what, that's a big step up from what's going on. Like, because obviously I'm as a Nintendo person, I also big into Pokemon. The kids are big into Pokemon, and like I still have I still play a lot of my 3DS more than I play the Switch realistically. But buying like Pokemon games that from the DS times, so not 3DS, it's not so bad. The DS times, like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and that sort of stuff, and Pokemon White and Black. Like there are people who are making so that to buy the original actual ones, you're talking a couple of hundred. It's not like mad money, but it's mad money for a game. Yeah. But it's not like thousands.
Yeah.
But people are making their own versions to the extent that like. If I was to go and buy a Pokemon DS game from somewhere online, like I'm taking that picture and I'm studying it to make sure it's actually legit, and like I know how to do that now, which is the worst part. I shouldn't know how to do that.
It's weird. I've actually seen some videos about that as well. About the I think it was the older games though. I don't think it was Diamond and Pearl. I think it might have been Gold and Silver. Are they?
No, they'd be on the Game Boy.
Yeah, I know that they were on the Game Boy Color, but I think those were the ones that I was seeing. That the guy got a load of them in. And he had to open up the actual cartridge and check the chip inside to see if it was a reproduction or not. Because Nintendo used a specific one, and then the people that are reproducing it, they use a different chip. But on the outside, it looks identical. And he was able to find that a couple of them were the reproductions. They were getting sold as real.
Shocking behavior.
Which is so strange in this day and age, because back in the day, they wouldn't have been about.
No.
So it's specifically for the people that are looking to play classic games that these things are being made.
Which is sad.
It's sad, but also I like the idea of people making older, more difficult to find media more accessible.
Yep.
As long as it's in a transparent way, I think it's okay. But if people,
if they're making them, they probably cost pennies to make, and they sold them for like a £10 or 20 quid. I'm totally down. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Go ahead. But if they're pretending they're real and selling them for like 200 quid, like that's a little shady in my estimation.
And just to bring it back to that Panzer Dragoon Saga as well, the original copy of that I've had since I was a kid, or it's my dad's, but the disc 2 on it, because it's a 4-disc game. The disc 2 at the very end of it, the data is damaged on our version. So whenever I went to replay it in my 20s, I got as far as the end of disc 2, and then there was a cutscene at the end of disc 2 to get into disc 3, and it jams at that cutscene at the very end of the disc.
That is sickening.
So that's how I found out that it was so expensive, is because I went on to try and get another version, and it was like fucking 700 quid. Like, what the fuck? Are you serious? And then a couple of years ago, I found one for like 350 quid. that was all original, all the discs, but it had a reproduction cardboard case for it, so it didn't have the original case. And that was why it was so cheap.
Yeah.
And I already had the original case. I was like, so I bought it and then just swapped the case out. So now I've got a full perfect kit, you know.
People probably kill for that at this point.
Yeah. But I've still got those. So I've basically got two versions of it, but one version has the disc 2 is broken. So I'm always on the lookout for a disc 2 of Panzer Dragoon Saga. Always sort of. Well, no, just the disc 2, just so I can have two complete sets.
Two complete.
But you just can't fucking find. I can't even get a reproduction disc 2 because you got to buy all 4 discs, or else there's a lot of people who sell just the disc 1 on its own, but nobody sells disc 2 on its own. I found one online, and the one that I found online is damaged. It doesn't work, and they're still selling it for like 80 quid. It's like, why would you pay 80 quid for a broken disc? But that's how rare the game is, you know.
I love that. But yeah, in terms of like Uncanny Valley in games, though, it's like there really wasn't a thing until maybe like late 2000s, as you say. Like it really, because it was like PlayStation 1 graphics especially are just so boxy. Like it's like I always think of Tomb Raider was the best example of that. And like I don't really think I've had too many like real heebie-jeebie moments in any games realistically, even like Skyrim and stuff. It was like, you know, it was Uncanny Valley definitely, but I wasn't like personally like offended by it in like a guttural way, you know. But there's like Polar Express is the classic example, that film with Polar Express of like that is just weird. There's something so soulless about that. But like, you know, that is literally the classic example. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about it.
I think that's because they got real people though and made them into these like plastic looking people. Beowulf is another one, I think. Like I always remember watching Beowulf and just think that just looks so fucking strange.
Yeah, there's something really unsettling about it.
And technologically, it's amazing what they did. Yeah. But they just took it. They took it as far as they could go, but they just couldn't go that extra wee bit.
The extra mile, it makes a big difference,
and I think anything up until the Uncanny Valley point, because it's sort of like no, it's not even like an inverted bell curve. It's like the realism kind of goes up, and then it just takes a massive dive, and then it sort of comes back up again if it was on a graph. So like the Uncanny Valley is that valley of
literal valley on the graph.
It's a valley on the graph where you go, right, well that doesn't look real, that looks really strange. And I think everything below the Uncanny Valley, you kind of got to use your imagination a little bit. So that's okay. You go, this is clearly just a representation of a human. And everything above that is so lifelike that you don't even really need to think about it. But in the Uncanny Valley, it's so close to being human that it's almost human, but it's not human. And we're hardwired to distrust anything that looks like a human,
but isn't
a human. And this is where my sort of weird, completely unsubstantiated theory is that, like, why did we evolve that? Like, what was in our past?
This is it.
Because, you know, right, we have arachnophobia, but some spiders can fucking kill you, man.
Yeah,
you know?
Same with snakes.
We got, you know, the snake phobia, right? That's precedented. Fear of heights. If you fall from heights, you're going to die.
Yep.
Like that, you know, especially if we evolved from, you know, tree-dwelling mammals in the past. You can see why, you know, having a fear of falling makes sense. But
is the fear of heights not like a fear of actually jumping off or something? It's like something very weird and specific. Really,
I have heard that it's that sort of.
It's not about actually being up high. It's about, and it's not even about falling. It's about you can't trust yourself not to go fucking jump.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe that's from tree dwelling times, and like, you know,
maybe
where you could have just jumped and you would have been grand, just grabbing all the branch. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure, but. It seems that all of the things that we have a fear of, it seems to be some kind of evolutionary trait.
Yeah, and you can figure out quite easily and quickly why.
You know, why am I afraid of this? Oh, because of this. You know, and even the ones that seem weird, like fear of clowns, like. I think clowns are in the Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, I was about to say that's pretty much exactly the same thing, isn't it?
But then people say, oh, you know, why are you afraid of clowns? There's no reason to be afraid of clowns. But then that ties back into the Uncanny Valley. Why are we afraid of these things that look human but aren't human? And
how old is the fear of clowns as a thing? Because like there was obviously that was a John Wayne Gacy or whatever. He was a clown serial killer back in the day. So it's not even like a media representation. That was just something that happened.
Yeah, but
and then like it obviously and all sorts of
but even kids, that I think that might have developed. Well, the serial killer thing might not have developed from it, but it might have developed from the phobia rather than the phobia deriving from it. Because even kids that don't know about serial killer clowns are still afraid of clowns.
That's fair. That is fair.
So I have always just thought, what was in our past that was something that was like so similar to being a human, that tried to pass as a human, and it was important for our survival to know that it wasn't a human, because every other phobia, every other fear, every other uncomfortable feeling, there is some kind of logical explanation, I feel, for all of them if you dig deep enough.
I'm just throwing out there, like, what about like gorillas? Like, they'll fuck you up, do you know what I mean?
Gorillas will fuck you up,
and they are human-like.
Yeah, but did we live side by side with them enough that we would have developed a phobia of them?
And not in Ireland ever, really. But like, as an idea.
Hominids, I don't think hominids really live in... I don't think... We were in a different environment, like gorillas were very, like... rainforest, jungle-based, and
you're right.
Humans were sort of savannah-based.
I'm just trying to the blue sky it.
Yeah. So I think that there was some kind of weird shape-shifting race that was maybe like trying to be around, or maybe it's. I would love to tie it into like an ancient aliens thing, and be like, there's there's some sort of weird thing in our past. Maybe not aliens, but there's some kind of weird thing in the past that we've developed this intense fear and great skill at discerning if something is a real human or pretending to be a human. And then now you have all these stories these days of like the Men in Black, who they show up and they seem like human, but then there's just something off about them. They're not quite right.
Will Smith?
No, not the like what the movie is based on is the Men in Black who sort of show up at all these weird events.
I just assumed that was like that the origin of Men in Black was whoever wrote it, as opposed to it was based on something else.
No, it's based on these people called the Men in Black who show up in these sort of black suits and hats and come and whenever people have like weird encounters and they show up afterwards, or like whenever strange phenomenon happen in places, that end up becoming like UFO sightings.
Imagine you were like actually that Men in Black people, the secret people that come and do these things, and then like, and you take great care to like be secretive, and then like 2000 comes along and Will Smith's rapping about you.
But the weird thing is that the Men in Black, anytime they show up, they don't even act like weird government people. They act like people trying to act like humans. They don't act
secretive. They're acting like they're trying.
They act as if they're just trying to be humans instead of acting like they're like a secret government agency. And a lot of people just get that Uncanny Valley thing from the Men in Black as well, and all the stories of them.
I'm going to have to look into this.
Yeah, so
I love the film.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll show up, like in Ireland, we talked about this before, we have lots of stories of like the fairies, folklore and stuff, where, you'll meet these strange beings who seem human, but, you'll meet them in a weird circumstance, or, you'll go and you'll chat to them, and then you'll go away and you'll come back and they'll have disappeared. Or
I feel like that's happened to me a couple of times in real life, where if somebody were to try hard enough, they could have convinced me that I've met a fairy or a shapeshifter of some description.
But I think that there's so much folklore about these weird supernatural beings, be it fairies or shapeshifters or elves or
we've talked about this
aliens.
a little bit before, but like
and then we've got this weird Uncanny Valley thing built into their genetics, where we're like, we get the heebie-jeebies about someone who seems just a little bit off.
I think like it's really hard for me to for somebody to convince me. Like, I get the idea that folklore is parables is, trying to explain a situation in a fancy way, so to speak. But the fact that every single human, and like no matter how isolated they are or not isolated they are, they make up their own stories about crazy ass shit that's happening, and they're all kind of similar in their own ways. They all have like very specific similarities. Like if you like uncontacted tribes, like they've never like seen Harry Potter, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Will have their own like fantastical ideas and of beasts and things that we say don't exist, but like it's impossible to convince me that like there was not some sort of thing.
Well, that's a really interesting thing. I would love to. How much time we got?
Oh,
Yeah, we got a little bit of time. So I'm big into this sort of theory of like ancient civilizations, because every bit of evidence that I've seen suggests that there was some kind of cataclysmic event about 13,000 years ago.
Yep.
Which was the Younger Dryas period, is what it's called. It's the end of the last ice age. And it ties in with a lot of the old texts of what they say was like the ancient Great Flood, which there's a Great Flood myth in basically every civilization around the world, all independently, all around about the same time, all reasonably similar stories. And you go, right, well, if they all have the same thing, then something must have happened.
Exactly.
And there's just so much evidence showing up now. Like, I really want to know more about Göbekli Tepe. You know that? No. So in Turkey, they've discovered this ancient site. So whenever we would have been in school, they said, "Oh, human civilization is 5,000 years old." It was like the ancient Sumerians were the first civilization, and they had writing and blah blah blah. And then they found Göbekli Tepe and a load of other places like Karen Tepe in Turkey, which is basically these massive structures that were built 11,000 years ago.
Oh.
And they like completely rewrite the history books, but a lot of big archaeology doesn't want you to know. So there's so much weird stuff about the excavation of it, and they've actually damaged the ruins. Like the people that are in charge of the archaeology in Turkey, they've basically set up this timeline where it's not going to be fully excavated for like 150 years. Jeez. So none of us will ever see it in our lifetime. And they've basically...
Well, it depends how science comes along.
Well, depending on how science comes along. But they've basically decided to go the tourist route rather than the try and find out answers route. So they've just built all these fucking viewing platforms right over the top of like the center of the ruins, and they've like dug down and like poured concrete down in for like all the steel posts, and they're just absolutely fucking wrecking the place. Just they build stuff so that they can accommodate more tourists.
I hate that so much.
I know, it's terrible, but the foundations of what they've already uncovered basically have been built on top of an even older structure which is underneath. So the stuff that they've already found is like 11,000 years old, and there's even more ancient stuff underneath it, and it looks like it's some kind of ceremonial place that they would have had. That people would have gathered and come to that place for big ceremonies in different times of the year, and it would have serviced like a wider community, like catchment area, that would have went for like miles and miles around, which is a society, basically. Exactly. So there was this society that existed, at least 6,000 years earlier than what we thought was the first civilization, more than twice. And then there's just loads of weird stuff, man. Whenever you look into stuff about like Atlantis and what they say about Atlantis, now I don't think Atlantis was like a great, futuristic civilization out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
But you don't know that.
I don't know it, but there's a thing called the Eye of the Sahara, which is this like weird circular fucking thing that's in the Sahara Desert. And the story of Atlantis came from, I think it was it Plato or was it Socrates or something? Their grandfather traveled to Egypt and spoke with the Egyptian priests, who would have been like, the most advanced people of that age.
Definitely.
And that's where a lot of the Greeks learned a lot of their stuff from the Egyptians. But the Egyptians at the time said about Atlantis, and said that it would have been 9,000 years ago that Atlantis existed, and then the cataclysmic events. But nine
geographically, Atlantis is actually just like not far from us, isn't it? Like the idea of it, at least.
Well, that's Brazil is what you're thinking of, is the island in the middle of the Atlantic that sort of rises and falls.
I'm pretty sure that I looked up like recently enough where would Atlantis have been, and it was like pretty much like off the south of Ireland.
Well, there's a tale of a place called Brazil, which I think sometimes that gets sort of confused, or people say, "Oh, Brazil and Atlantis are the same thing." But I personally think that it's possibly something to do with. Well, I kind of have two ideas of what it could be, because there's a massive rise in sea levels down in the. I don't know what you call that basin. It's not the Mediterranean basin, but down like near the Black Sea, where you have all the sort of Middle Eastern countries around it. Mm-hmm. But there's like this tiny little gap of between. I can't remember what countries it is. Is it the strait at the bottom of Spain that connects Spain? No, I need to look into it. But there's this tiny little gap that basically used to be a land bridge, and then the land eroded away, mm-hmm. and allowed the water from the Atlantic Ocean to move in towards the sea and fill up. So the sea's water level rose way up and took out a whole swathe of land that all would have been around the Mesopotamia, mm-hmm. where all the like Sumeria and stuff would have been.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the basis of like civilization in the early days. That was like the earliest people that were building societies were down in this area, and then there was this massive sudden sea rise. So there's ideas that could have been where the Great Flood myth comes from.
I just I've had a thought about your lizard people.
Okay.
So lizards are amphibious.
Well, no, the lizard people's a totally different thing.
But I'm saying, if lizard people were the people that caused us to be uncanny valleyed,
yeah,
surely they would have thrived in this Great Flood situation, as opposed to being wiped out.
Well, not all reptiles are. Well, reptiles and amphibians are two different things. Yeah. But
are we saying that reptile people or amphibious people?
See, I don't specifically believe in the Silurians, but the Silurians are a thing that are talked about, which are like an ancient race of reptile people. But
they're reptiles. Yeah, my bad.
But they're also shapeshifters, and apparently they live among us, and that's who the elites and the Illuminati are, and all this kind of stuff.
That's just so far fetched for me. Like it's like bad science fiction.
Yeah, that's too far for me. I don't believe in any of that kind of shit.
That's too much.
But it's interesting, it's nice conspiracy theory fodder.
But it's just like, who thought of this and said, you know what, I'm going to tell everybody about this, and then somebody else said, I agree with that. Yeah. And like, how did this get traction?
I don't know. I personally don't believe in the Silurians. I don't even really believe in shapeshifters, but I think it's a good thought experiment of why the uncanny valley is around. I think there's got to be something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's got to be something that was similar enough to us, or something that was trying to pull the wool over our eyes at some point.
And that means
and I do believe in aliens, and I believe that there may be aliens which are visually similar to us, or that are able to be visually similar to us. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's a race of reptile people called the Silurians or not, I think probably not. But I mean, there's just so much weird stuff about ancient. Like there's this, as you were saying, about uncontacted tribes. There's a tribe in Africa who are basically living the same way that they were living 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. But they have this tale of where humans came from and where their gods came from, and they were talking about the Sirius star system.
Yeah.
And they were saying, there's two. It's got two suns, and that's where we all come from, where our gods came from. And people were like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. This is just your mythology, basically. And then
the fact that they have mythology is what I'm trying to say. It's not like they learned it from.
But then this you can't see with the naked eye. But then scientists found out that actually that Sirius star system does have two, like it's a binary star system, and it's got two suns, and you can't see it with the naked eye, and it is as far away as they said. It'd take whatever amount of years the speed of light, and it is that far away. And there's
mad.
And that's just these guys that are out hunting with spears and living in mud huts, and they know this shit.
There was something recently that some boy got arrested for, and I'm not sure exactly where, but for going to an uncontacted tribe illegally because it's illegal to do that, and bringing them coke and stuff.
Oh, really?
And it was clearly a YouTube influencer situation.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I'm glad he got arrested because that's fucked up.
Yeah,
they don't need to know about coke.
No, I seen a thing online the other day, and someone was like, "Why don't we put on a drone show for an uncontacted tribe and become their gods?"
It's so fucked up.
And it was just this picture of all the drones in the night sky making a human face. It was like. You see what?
That is awful. That was so rude, man.
I know that we have, some very basic drone shows that are starting to get done, at
Halloween festival.
At Halloween festival. But have you seen the ones that the Chinese can do, man?
Yeah, mad.
Their drone game is
it's the next level. It is
next level. Nobody can touch them. So ingenious, aren't they?
I've started to become a little bit more fascinated with going to China than other countries recently.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something about it where when you think about it, we actually know quite little about China.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of communism. I don't like the idea of a government having total control over everything.
But a seventh of the whole world lives there.
But aside from the communism of the government, technically owning everything and the people not being able to own everything, which isn't really true because there's loads of Chinese billionaires, but it seems like a little bit of an oligarchy game. Aside from that, the Chinese people they pull their fucking bootstraps on, don't they?
I've never met a Chinese person that doesn't genuinely.
They just busted their ass for the last 50 years and just smashed it.
Yeah.
They just continually smashed it. They went from a developing country to pretty much number one. Okay, maybe America's got a bit of an edge on them.
That opening ceremony at the Olympics though with the drummers, man, that was a turning point. I feel like we're that is just absurd. That was so good.
That's the thing. They developed a mad work ethic, and now it's paying off for them. And people can turn around all they want and say, "Oh, China this and China that," but it's just people,
Great bunch of lads.
People are just people, and they're not fucking magic. They just work. They worked really fucking hard, and now they got the fruits of their labor.
People are just people. That's such a simple concept.
And if you're butthurt that they got a great economy and they got all this class stuff, well, I mean, they fucking worked for it. What have you done?
Yeah, exactly.
But I got time. I got time for China. A lot of this sort of stuff about China's doing this.
There's nowhere I don't have time for it to be clear, but I'm especially drawn to when I was thinking about going to Egypt recently enough, and there was some sort of war on or some sort of unrest, some civil unrest. I'm constantly I think about. Well, people said that about Northern Ireland for a long time. And everything was kind of grand, realistically. Not that everything was good, but for a tourist to visit, it wasn't mad unsafe. Do you know what I mean?
It wasn't mad unsafe, but it wasn't the nicest place in the world either.
Because we grew up in it, I feel like Billy Big Bulls, when somebody's can't go there, it's not safe, I'm like, I can. And not because I'm hardened by it. It's not that. It's that it's the opposite. Is that I feel like they make too much of a big deal about it in general.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. But I think we should call it a day at that.
I think so. Let's leave it there. Next time we'll talk about something different. Maybe some Catholic guilt.
Next time we always talk about something different. We're not going to talk about the same thing twice.
We tried two in a row here.
About a guilt. I think we'll talk about guilt the next time. Because I think it's something very relatable. Maybe not the Catholic guilt might be relatable for everybody, but certainly feeling guilty about not being as productive as the Chinese. I feel guilty that I'm not as productive as the Chinese.
I don't.
They can do it, and I have a hard time getting out of bed sometimes. But
we'll talk about that next time.